Sandy, welcome to Stories in AI. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for taking the time. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite a while, and you're really making the waves right now with all the Web3 stuff happening. So before we dive into all of
Yep.
that, why don't you start with your personal journey? Talk to us about your journey. You've had such an accomplished career, and I can't wait for the audience to hear all about it.
Well, thank you. I don't know if it's that accomplished, but it's been quite interesting. Let me just say that. So I have been recently working in the tech field for quite some time. I actually started, Ganesh, we talked about, I started back in the Web 1.0 days with commerce, where we actually took a commercial from that was on TV and they routed everybody to web commerce and it broke the internet for a while, which was kind of cool. And then I entered Web 2.0 and I became the social business evangelist and leader for IBM and really helped to create that Web 2.0 connection and universe that existed there. And then went to Amazon Web Services and continued that mission with obviously cloud and artificial intelligence and IoT. So it's been a really interesting journey. I mean, every company I've worked for has been just a fabulous leader company at their time, at their stage and their time of that journey. And most recently, I've taken a role with Unstoppable Domains, which is now entering into Web3. Now, I played around with Web3 a little bit, actually, believe it or not, in my IBM days with blockchain and then with Amazon Web Services with blockchain. But now it's really become much more embedded into who I am. I started doing all these side projects and was just fascinated by what could be with Web3. And so here we are today. I am SVP and Channel Chief for Unstoppable Domains.
That is awesome. Web 1, you broke Web 1, almost brought down Web 1, or actually
Yep.
did, then help, develop the Web 2 ecosystem through two of the biggest names in the in Web 2. And now you're at Unstoppable Domains, so that's amazing in Web 3. So break it down for everybody. What is Web 3 and why is it relevant right now?
Well, I like to describe it this way. So Web 1 was read only. So when we were doing Web 1, it was really about you reading the online news. Web 2 became read, write, or read and communicate because you were leveraging social media to communicate the value that you were going to bring. But Web3 takes it not only from read, write, but to own. It's really an ownership economy where the user now takes back control, if you would. So if you think about it, all those platforms extract value from users, right? So their job has been, let me attract the user, and then I extract value from their data. So let's just take a simple example. I joined Twitter very early on. I've been a member since 2008, believe it or not. And today's valuation of Twitter is, I don't know, $29 billion. Now, I did get value from Twitter for networking and connection, but Twitter got the financial value, that $28 billion worth of value. And Web3 says, well, if you're the user, or you're really a member, then the value that you should get should be part financial. It should not be just the social networking, the connection. And so if you think about it, the whole value point of Web3 is that the user owns their own data. They decide when to give up that data, when to sell the data, how to use the data, how to protect the data. And I think that's probably the biggest difference in Web3. And there's lots of technologies that make that possible, but that's kind of the simple way that I like to describe it.
Awesome. No, I have more a philosophical argument on that, right? That it's embedded, which is like, look, Web3 is about an ownership economy. It's about making sure that the user themselves can participate in the capital accumulation, the valuation, or the financial incentive, right? If you look at every other walks of life and how human philosophy evolved, if you will, we always come back to, everybody makes a lot of money and then looks back and says, look, money is not everything, right? So is that the right incentive, or is it more like an option that everybody has the opportunity and the option to make financial gains out of their own data,
Yeah.
right? That's one part of it. So, go ahead, answer that, and I have more a tactical or a technical
Yeah.
question around
Okay.
that, please.
Well, it's not just about financial gains, always or ever. I mean, think about it today. Like, I'll give you a couple of challenges that I have. My daughter took some classes at a community college, and I want her to be able
Hmm.
to apply those credits to her university college. Um, the steps I had to take to get that information that's really mine, right? Or my daughter's, that she took the class, that she passed the class,
Yep.
that she now has a skill set. But the data, the information was actually owned by the university. And it took me a long time to be able to get that data to transfer it to a university. What if in Web3, that identity of my skill sets and what I'm doing belong to me? Right? That would be another. And
Sure.
then another great one is, think about healthcare data. I recently moved from Seattle, Washington to Arizona, hence my cactus in the background. And now getting
Yeah.
that data, that healthcare data, which is about me, to me has been extremely hard too. Multiple calls, multiple, oh, I can't give it to you. I have to give it to the next doctor. They can't give my data to me. It's kind of interesting, right? So
Yep.
it's not just about monetizing the data for you. That is a part of it, but it's also about who really owns that data, who really should own that data, and how do I keep it with me, and how do I keep it protected for me?
No, it's interesting. Also, I mean, there is the VCs versus the Web3 and developers and VCs versus Jack Dorsey and Aaron Levy argument going all over the internet about this, right? Why can't Web2 technologies really enable that? Because, and that's, I want to get into that. But even on at a technical level, you said storing the data, protecting the data, securing that data. Now, both of us have been in technology businesses for a while now, right? And we understand it. We probably have the skill sets or the ecosystem to help us with that skill set. Is that I mean, but can you expect the average citizen to actually be, if you hand them the keys and say, okay, go, store your data, protect your data, and secure the data, or is that going to be is that going to help them? Because securing, compared to the Fort Knox that a Fortune 500 companies is securing your data versus an individual doing it, right? Explore that a little bit for me. Or is it just a
Yeah, I mean,
timing thing?
I would say right now it's a timing thing, and I would also say that right now, well, let me back up. I think there are five basic assumptions that you're kind of going into about Web3. One is that it's decentralized. Two, there is a digital
Yep.
identity, which I talked about. Three, that it's built on
Yep.
blockchain. Four, that it's trustless, and five, that it financially benefits the user. So if I talk about decentralization today and where we are today, Web3 is actually dependent on Web1 companies and Web2 platforms today. So think about Twitter, think about
Yep.
Discord, think about OpenSea. I mean, we're dependent on those platforms, which are built on Amazon Cloud, Google Cloud. And so today we're building on top of prior technologies and prior knowledge, and I think that's okay for where we are right now. I think it's decentralized partially today. And so I don't think this battle of, Web 2 versus Web 3, right now it's both. I think the premise is, how do you really drive the value and the value for the user or for the member? In fact, Web3, they call them members, not users, because as a member, you're transformed there. So, for me, there's a lot. We just did a Twitter Spaces with a bunch of enterprise customers, and they're like, well, Sandy, one of the premises of Web3 is that you have to use a blockchain. Well, why couldn't we do this with Web2 technology? Well, today, Web 3 blockchain has transparency built in, right? That's why you have the blocks. It's transparent. Ownership is in the hands of the participants or the members, not
Member.
necessarily the users.
Yep.
Decision making offer is the hands of those members as well, right? Using tokens. So there are some projects that allow them to vote.
Yep.
And then assets can be quickly liquidated and change in value, and those tokens are programmable. So for me, the argument about what technology could you use or how do you use it is interesting, but there are requirements that have to occur in order for the basic premises of the Web3 mantra to take place or belief system to take place.
No, I totally agree with you, because I think one of the things most folks, when you take the religious sites and have those arguments saying, hey, it has to be all Web3, all the five elements of that capabilities that you mentioned should be in there to be considered, doesn't really matter, to be honest with you, right? This is a technology continuum. There has been innovations that have happened over the past, 100 decades, right? And then how do you actually build on that? But then it provides a compelling vision to how the future world can be and could be, that is a lot more equitable, a lot more opportunistic for everybody. And that is the big idea. And so personally, I'm a huge believer, and I've been in that space, in and out for the last, and along with my AI stuff for the last, since 2016, 2017 too. So pretty exciting. So, one of the most talked about stuff around this is definitely the creator economy, or like, as you said, the ownership of the creation that you do, right? And the NFTs, non-fungible tokens. And explore that a little bit for me. How does that fit into this entire ecosystem? Why is that relevant?
Well, I think there's a lot of relevancy in this because as you are building or collecting, I think the part of the key takeaway is that you should participate in that as well. And today, think about it. That exists in the real world too, right? IRL. It's here today. So today you might
Yeah.
collect, I don't know, you might be a Beanie Baby collector or a baseball card collector. I don't know what you collect, but today, you collect things today. And I think part of the interest is, how do you know that what you collected was real? You can be scammed as well in the real world, just as you can in other places. And then, people are like, well, an NFT is just a digital picture. I can take a picture of that, or I can copy, Sandy, your profile picture, and then I have that as well. Well, you could do the same thing like in a gallery, right? You could go to the Louvre and take a picture of it, but you don't own it. You have a picture of it and you can enjoy it. So owning art is not about
So true.
keeping others from enjoying it. It's about proof of ownership. And so I believe that, part of Web3 is about, art, media. In fact, I think that's where we are today and kind of the continuum. You mentioned the continuum of where you are today. I think that that's where we are today, which is just testing out kind of this collectibles notion or this art notion of where we are today, and looking at the value that it could transpire. I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's kind of where I see this today. A lot of people question, well, what do you do? And I can just take a picture of it, but you can do that today in the real world too. It's really now about
Yeah.
sharing in that. So if you think about music or even an NFT picture, I have some NFTs that I purchased that when I benefit from the sale of that or from producing a t-shirt on that, the artist continues to benefit as well. And others, I buy it and then it's mine. I can sell my own t-shirt with that NFT art in it. And so those are just kind of the business models
No,
that I see today. Yep.
no, it's so true. I think, in fact, one of the things that, like, the fifth element that you mentioned when you talk about Web3, all the criteria that makes something Web3, around the financial incentive or the financial, inclusion in that particular journey. I, grew up Southern India, and I always like to say, right, very, I grew up poor, but I'm a product of my opportunities handed to me, right? More than anything, like, even artists around the world today, and then it could be any kind of digital creation that you do beyond just art and pictures and so forth. uh, you can really, this really opens up the opportunity pool to make sure it's authentically yours, and then you can actually also get the rights to benefit from it when it goes on, right? So to me, NFTs signal that bigger opportunity for almost anything when you go from the physical world to the real world. I mean, there's a gentleman here in Austin called Pete Rex, and he moved from Seattle. He started this Rex group of companies focused on real estate tech, and he talks about this whole notion of thing. I think houses will be, on a blockchain, the house records and stuff like that. But even ownership and your title is a great opportunity for actually turning it into an NFT, because it can only be one house in one location in one place. So, and then that eliminates a lot of challenges in terms of like the fight for ownership and things like that you have to go through people and centralized organizations and so forth, right? Yeah, no, it's. I think NFTs to me offers a bigger opportunity than what you immediately is in front of us. So enter the metaverse, right? So now there's a lot of buzz around it, a lot of hype around it. Thank you, Zuckerberg, for making sure 3.5 billion people now know about it. How do you describe it? How does all of this play in? How does Web3 come into effect into enabling a metaverse? Explore that for me a little bit more.
Yeah, so let me see if I can break this down first. So let's just talk about for a second, what is the metaverse? So a metaverse is really an online digital environment, and avatars or people could inhabit it digitally. And it's really built on virtual reality, augmented reality, gaming, mobile, and computers. So there's a lot behind it. So essentially, it's a new digital environment for you. In fact, we were just working with Atlantis and the Atlantis metaverse, which is a metaverse that's built on like Aquaman and that sort of thing, enabling you to experiment with so many different things. And people get confused often about, okay, well, metaverse. Now you're talking about metaverse, talking about Web3, what's really going on. But this is kind of how I see it. We're really creating this two-sided market, right? There's this creator market that we just talked about. And then there is these digital networks, right? Multiple-sided consumption models. And in the middle is this stack of what I call technology and other things. So at the very bottom, I see Web3, this decentralization we talked about, data sovereignty that we talked about. Enabling that is the blockchain, and in some cases, trust and crypto, right? That trusted, private, secure area. And then sitting on top of that, I just listened to a great session last night on DAOs, right? These decentralized governance models that exist that are a lot of times AI driven. And then on top of that is the metaverse. So I think the metaverse actually depends upon Web3, crypto, blockchain, the DAOs that exist out there in the marketplace. And that digital experience and that digital world needs and requires all of those pieces. So they're all linked together and they're all needed as you go forward. And that then also, creates kind of some of the new technologies of Web3 that we just talked about in our debate earlier.
Got it. No, it's actually interesting, and I think of this as the metaverse is also it's relevant more so because now people are spending more time online than they were spending offline. I mean, thank you,
COVID.
Coronavirus in the last few years.
Right? Yeah, that's right.
So I think, right. So it kind of creates this need, if you will, to actually put a little bit more structure to the interactions that you have. And part of that is, as you said, you called out a lot of different layers, right? The trust layer. How do you actually have transactions in a trusted fashion? Hence the blockchain and enabling something like that. How do you have governance without being impeded by corrupt organizations in the middle? So DAOs come into play, right? How do you actually have, you trust software versus thing. Overall, to me, and tell me if you agree or disagree, Sandy, there is a transition of trust from individuals and people to software and engineering and code, if you will, right? The Uber movement that is happening. To me, the core of what is happening right now is people are losing they're mistrusting centralized organizations, governments. That's the movement happening all over the world, right? And because humans alone and collective humans alone cannot scale without the assistance of machines and algorithms and code, if you will. Is that a broader movement? Do you see it the same way? Is that a transition of trust from groups of individuals to systems and processes and code, if you will.
I think some of it is a movement, but I don't see it moving to a system. So, today, let's just take a normal transaction. Let's see if this might help us. If I'm going
Sure.
to let's say, make a mortgage payment, then typically I have
Yep.
to go to a bank to do that mortgage payment. And the bank then relies on obviously systems and computers and that sort of thing. But I do have that central
Yep.
organization, the bank that's there. If I think about that same transaction in a Web3 world, I would take that money to a blockchain where it would be transparently
Yeah.
viewed. I wouldn't have to, it would be all public, right? It would be immutable. So it couldn't be changed. No one could try to cheat me out of something. It would be decentralized because there would be no central controller, and it would be running 24/7 because it was dependent on code. But I think in some part, there's some piece of that trust that says, you know what, I trust myself as the best person to manage my data than a central entity that I really don't know. And so that's kind of how I see it. It's almost like, your career, right? In the past, people would
Yeah.
say, work with your manager, they're going to help you with your career. But today, they're like, no one else is going to manage your career but you. And I see Web3 almost being like that too, right? Who better to manage your data than you and leveraging the technology? But the technology has this transparency about it, it's not hidden. So I don't see
Yep.
it as a black box. Like, when I hear technology, I think about a black box. It's not a black box. It's a transparency that I think is really changing with trust.
No, I agree. I think, it's kind of creates that, the tools and the technology provides a collaborative ecosystem to enable that, right? Like things like blockchain, the transparent nature and so forth. But fundamentally, I think it's also the fact that centralized systems, there's the whole world has gone through centralization, decentralization back from, Web 1, Web 2, right? So one of the things that I always wonder is like, is this just another move? Like you go now, you're like way too centralized as a universe today, that we need the decentralization to keep up with the scale of people, of ideas, and explosion of talent and everything. But then there'll be a point where it'll be a complete Yahoo land, and we'll have to come back to a centralized structure or somewhere in the middle to go to make
You
this
may be
happen,
right. You
right?
may be right. And that's why I like today's model where we're Web3, but we're using Web2. So we're kind of there right now, right? We
Mm.
really are. Um, we're not completely decentralized. We're still dependent upon Web2 technologies, which is why I love all the discussions and the Twitter spaces and debating it, because I think we're debating theory, right? It's either all Web2 or all Web3. I think we're debating that theory versus what the reality is today.
That's so true. And I spent a long time with Dell in my career. And if Michael Dell will be listening to this conversation, he'll talk about it saying, 10 years ago, I told you the world is not going to be cloud or on premises, right? It's going to be a hybrid world. And everybody's now coming onto it. Same here. So, I want to ask you about unstoppable domains and the role domains have in this whole thing. And you mentioned identity, you touched upon a lot of things. Talk to me about what is the transformation that's happening at unstoppable domains, and why are domains the maybe the gateway to the metaverse, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, so I find domains to be an easy entry point into the whole Web3, the bigger view, right? Because with a domain, you can send and receive crypto with a human readable name, not like this. I don't know if you've ever done it before, if you're listening or watching us, but it's a long series of letters and numbers, and you can make a mistake. There's so many
Yeah.
articles about it, but the domain enables you to send and receive crypto with that human readable
Yeah.
name. But in addition, it also serves as a username for you on Web3. You'll see a lot of people say, I'm Sandy.nft or I'm, Matt.crypto. It also serves as a username and a place eventually for you
Yeah.
to host a decentralized website. So a website that's built on all this technology. But in addition, what it's doing right now is is it's also enabling login to some of these things we've been talking about. So, for example, using your domain name, you can log into the Atlantis Metaverse. You can use that same domain name to log into Cook Financial. So,
Yeah.
that concept of your identity travels with you is becoming a reality very slowly. I'm not saying we're all there yet, but very slowly, right?
Sure.
Because the vision is that eventually you could enter any metaverse, any game with the same domain name and not have to switch it out. In fact, I
Yeah.
tell a lot of my friends, they complain, "Oh my gosh, I'm a premium user on LinkedIn, but I enter Facebook and I've got no clout, or I enter Instagram and I've got no clout." Well, why is that? Well, that's because the
That's true.
information about you is owned by LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or um, Twitter, any other social platform out there. So your identity doesn't travel with you. But here you can already see the use
Yeah.
cases. Your domain name is traveling with you to the metaverse, to a game, to your bank. And so that
Yeah.
enables you to then you're owning your identity, and your identity, you're immutable. It doesn't change. Your identity is your identity. And I love that, right? I'd love to take the cloud I have today on LinkedIn and move it over to other social platforms, but I can't do that today.
I totally agree. I think, it's, I think it was 1729.com, Balaji Srinivasan's blog and his initiative. And he talks about this notion of, work will be all micro work. Will be, you can easily break down a large piece of work into little tasks and stuff like that. And credentialing will be a thing of the past because it's going to be social proof than credential, proof of work, proof of talent, proof of capability. And then you mix the two together, and now you just opened up the entire universe for anybody to do anything sitting anywhere, right? And then domains create that particular thing. I'm also hoping that in the process we also eliminate passwords, because I am done with all the different
Yeah.
combinations I can have with my password I've been using for 20 years,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah, in fact,
yeah,
I
hopefully
just read an
that'll
article on that said on average people have 100 passwords. I actually had to get a password safe, and I counted mine the other day. I have 527 passwords. So imagine the next world where I can use sandy.nft and I can use that everywhere. That would be brilliant, right? I think that would be brilliant anyway. And
that would be
make it
brilliant.
much easier.
I
Make it
think
much
so.
easier as long as it's secure. I love that concept.
Yeah, no, it definitely. I think, like, it's there's so many opportunity when I look at the intersection of this and AI, for example, right? Being able to use your face as an ID and your human readable domain as the interface, or the username, if you will, right, to get into any part of the metaverse. So there's so much opportunities here. Explore a little bit on the AI and Web3 kind of an intersection. What do you see there? Is it the trust layer, the DAO layer that you talked about? I mean, where do you see those intersections with AI?
Definitely the DAO layer for sure. But I think that AI, I mean, I'm a big AI fan. I've been with AI for quite some
Yes.
time. So I really think that AI could be used on all of this, because if you think about it, all of this is built on data, right? So if you think about one of the cornerstones of Web3 is data, right? All that digital
Yeah.
data information about you. So imagine if I could use artificial intelligence, if you grant me permission to get your data. Let's say that I am a merchant and I sell new home goods. And if I could get your data, then I might give you, $150 card to buy something because you've been in your home, you're established in Austin. Whereas I just moved, they may give me a $1,500 card because now they have some of that information that's been mined and leveraged by artificial intelligence. So I
Sure.
see anywhere there's data, and there will be lots of data here for the
Of
metaverse
course.
and for Web3. I think anytime there's data, it's a perfect use case for what we have going on with artificial intelligence, because you need all that data. All that data feeds, right? People call it oil or soil. Everything grows from that data. And I really find that
Yeah.
that data will be a big driver. And if you think about the use cases for the metaverse, right? Connecting virtual worlds, having a synchronous, view, or massively scaling in order to do either the work applications that'll exist in the metaverse, or the play applications, or the socialization, or the transaction. I think that artificial intelligence will be involved in each and every one of those use cases.
I totally agree. Couldn't agree more. Now, if you're a traditional organization, and a lot of the audience is, several executives in large organizations, and you being in your, most of them will complain that, hey, I just started my cloud journey, or I just started my AI journey. Now I'm looking at Web3. How should they think about this moment in history right now, right? Where all this thing is happening, blockchain, it's still very early, but there's a lot of momentum. Always look at developer movement, developer motivation as a huge, early indicator on how the market's going to evolve, right? And you can see that in Web3. Like almost every single really smart, super smart AI developer, machine learning engineer I know, drop their AI work and they're moving into
Yeah,
crypto, right? They're like, I'm going to go do
yeah,
Web3,
yeah.
right? How should traditional organizations and leaders think about this moment in history, and what should they do to prepare?
Well, I would say the first thing they need to do is just learn and be curious, like listening to your podcast, to understand a little bit more about it. Because, if you've got to take time to understand what's going on. I know learn and be curious is an Amazon leadership principle, but I love the Amazon leadership principles. You need to take time to figure out the people that you're actually going to listen to, because there's so much fun out there right now. Find spaces that deliver,
Yes.
really high quality, open conversations where you feel comfortable to ask questions. Like this weekend, we did a Twitter Spaces. We had 10,000 people on the Twitter space asking questions about Web3. And we said, look, there's no question that's too dumb, that's too simple. We may not have all the answers, but that would be something that you'd want to do. And then I would say start reading and learning. There are some great podcasts, there are some great essays, there are amazing articles out there. I took a class with MIT on Web3. It's just like a basic beginner business journey. And then I would say play with it as a consumer. Get a wallet, buy some crypto. It doesn't mean you have to invest your whole life savings in it. Buy some crypto, get a domain, maybe buy, an NFT piece of artwork, or experiment with one of the, maybe with one of the
Skin
metaverses
in
or the
the game.
games. And then I would say,
Yeah. Get
yeah,
skin in
go ahead.
the game,
I'm
basically,
sorry.
right? Get skin in the game. Get your
Yeah,
skin in
and
the
do
game,
it
right?
I would say do it personally first, and then look at some of the use cases that exist out there for the business and really explore those. So for example, there's a lot of decentralized finance applications out there. People who are pooling money to make loans where anyone in the world could participate. Um, and, see what those are about. Go take a look at Cook Finance. What are they doing? How are they using it? Or, look at in-game economics. If you've ever played a video game, you'll see some of the in-game currency. How is that playing out? What if the money was real? What would
Tokenization.
you think there? So I think that if you
Got it.
start playing around with it and then join the conversations, I think you'll start to feel more comfortable and know where you're going to go. We don't know, and the playbook's not been written here, so we don't know all of the use cases that will exist. We know some that are starting, but I mean, the world is your oyster. It's the time to innovate is now, really.
That is awesome. Can you explore some more of those business use cases within Web3? I love, is DeFi the right place to start? Should you start thinking about, I love the in-game economics, or just in general, how do you use tokenization to create reward systems and stuff? Like, what are some, if I'm a business leader looking at, talking to you, and like, what are the 2 or 3 use cases I should go explore right away?
Yeah, well, the ones that I had down were DeFi, to make sure that you understood that, in-game economics, which I think are really important. I would also look at some of the governance experiments that are out there too, right? Where governance gives you access to a voting right, and the DAOs. I think that those are really
Yeah.
interesting and fascinating to look at how they're coming alive today and what the implications may be. Last night I was listening to one on DAOs replacing SPACs in 2022. What would be the implications of that? Anyway, I think that's another really interesting one. Olympus is building a community owned DAO based on financial
Yeah.
infrastructures and reserve currency. There's some fascinating things out there. And then,
Bankless down.
yeah, and then I would look at some of the use cases with the creators as well, because every company creates IP. And so I think the changes for business owners will be maybe larger than the magnitude of how mobile or the internet itself changed the way businesses worked. If you think about that ownership right, I think it's a space that's worth paying attention to. And what's happening today with NFTs, how they're building art communities and music communities. I think that could be another fascinating one. How will that impact open source? Right. Well, now, and the ability to leverage a piece of code, could that be done as a creator where any company who uses or leverages it? I don't know. There's so many use cases, but those would be the top 5 that I would
Yeah.
suggest.
That is awesome. No, I love the governance side. I've been actually involved with Olympus as well as
Oh,
the
you have? I didn't know that.
bankless DAO.
Really?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I think I've been playing around with this too. It's actually, it's one of the things I realized is like on the DAO side. I forgot who said this, but this is always I try to get these. The mix up with some philosophical arguments in the back layer, right? So one of that is the fact that the democracy, a classic democracy, a voting system, is the worst system of governance, except that's better than every other system, right? Which is the way as they publicly say it. So I always wonder, right? Is the whole there's a lot more intelligence and context that needs to be driven into the classic DAO structure, which is purely by voting, right? And there are some amazing experiments that Olympus is doing, which is like things like how do you actually create different kind of like your shareholder votes, different classes of votes, different roles within the DAO, right? I explored earlier last year, building a company for data labeling, right? Crowdsource data labeling, but use DAOs as a way for organizations to, put
Interesting.
in their projects, submit their projects, but then create a community where you have voting members, you have, participants, you have checkers, and so forth. So it's fascinating, and I love the creator co-creation. Fundamentally, I believe that every product company out there has to really start exploring how do you co-create with your users and customers, right? And Web3 provides an amazing opportunity to do it.
Yeah.
So this is
And
fascinating,
this,
Sandy. This has been
and I
amazing.
think I think I really applaud you for doing this podcast on it, because I'll post something on LinkedIn and people will ping me, and they'll say, "Am I a dinosaur? Like, what is a DAO? Am I a dinosaur? What is an NFT?" And I think everybody needs to learn right now to see what's going to apply and help to create those next use cases. And again, it's not Web 2 versus Web 3. It's Web 2 and Web 3, at least for right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to look at it versus this huge competition that it doesn't have to be.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think to your point on and you made the comment. I think early last week I published like a 2022 late predictions for 2022, and basically the DAOs will be the new SPACs is one of the items
Yeah.
that I put in. It's actually very
Yeah.
true. And then I do believe, Sandy, to your point, right? The world is going to we're moving towards radical decentralization in everything, every system, every interaction that we're having, and the radical automation powered by intelligent automation like AI and so forth. So, like love your advice to business leaders: get engaged, learn, get your skin in the game personally, and then pick projects that you can actually go experiment with, right? And that's a big call to action. This is awesome. I have a few more quick questions, and then Sandy, I'll let you go. Thank you so much for spending the time. Um, what are your predictions for 2022 in this world? What can we expect? There's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts here, right? Give me your top 3 to 5. What you're thinking of?
Well, I think there are a couple. One, which is really close to my heart, is that I think that women and diverse groups will actually emerge really strong and do more and have more influence than in Web 1 and Web 2. You're already seeing it in
Amazing.
NFT communities like Boss Beauties, Women Rise. I think that women if they're going to jump in early, which they are, I think will influence and impact the technology direction, the direction that we're headed in governance. And I think that will be incredible because I do believe that innovation is born of diversity. So I think that that will be awesome. The second is I do think that Web3 identity is the gateway to the metaverse. So I do think digital identity, that's why I'm here at Unstoppable, because they were such a leader in digital identity. And I do believe that
Yeah.
Web3 identity or that digital identity will become the gateway to the metaverse and more. So those are two that I feel really
Good.
strongly about. I also think that where we are today, I was spending this weekend trying to do a couple of things, and oh my gosh, ease of use and UX are very lacking today in Web3.
Huge.
So I think they're going to become more important. And I think that until we have the right UX and the right ease of use. So if you're a designer, this is the place to come. You're going to have an amazing opportunity here. And then my fourth one would be infrastructure for the creator economy will be reimagined. And it has to be reimagined based on Web3 in terms of payroll, benefits, culture. You can think of a whole more set.
Yeah.
So I do. I also published my 2022 predictions as well. And those were just some of the top ones that I had as well.
That is awesome, and I'll put that in the show notes for everybody to actually get a hold of. And my last question to you, more a personal question, Sandy. Share one of your personal practices that has really helped you to be on top of your game.
Oh, wow. There's so many. One, I would say that I think is really important, which is to also be in the real world. We can be so attached to our phone, so into the NFT galleries, into gaming, metaverse. You can get just lost in it. And I do think it's important that you learn, but there is a real world out here. So make sure that you spend time with your family. We do every Sunday night, we have digital devices down and we have a movie night. We just sit
Wow.
and chat. We make different kinds of popcorn and just interact. We exercise. We get outside before our movie night. I think it's really important that you take care of yourself, and I think that means as well getting away for some of those digital devices as well.
That is awesome. No, that's great piece of advice. I'm gonna try to do that like one of these days. Try to do no devices day. We'll see. I try to do it like a few times a year. Just do like a couple of days in a like back to back, and definitely helps a lot. But love the idea of including that with fun and family and entertainment, and that's amazing. Sandy, this has been a blast. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for jumping on. Um,
Thank you for having me. And
any
no,
questions?
thank you for having me. And if anybody wants more information, I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram. So if you do have other questions, please reach out. I'm more than happy to help as well to address those. And if I could, I don't know when this is going live, but on International Women's Day on March 8th, we're going to do a
Okay.
24-hour Twitter space. So we're going to have a different topic each hour for a solid 24
Wow.
hours. We're dedicating that Twitter space to women and diversity, but anybody can join in. And like I said, each hour will be something that you must know about, like what is a DAO? What is blockchain? How do I write a Web3 app? Or, simple community things, or how do I get mentoring on it? It will be a must
Ama-
see event. So I'll give you that schedule as well.
Perfect. No, that's amazing. I'll definitely put that in the thing, and we'll promote it before that, and we'll make sure that everybody, this audience, also gets the opportunity to join those spaces. Sandy, thanks so much for jumping on. It was a
Thank you
blast.
so much. I'll see you soon.
See ya.